All right. Well, we've got Carl Joseph Demarco back in the studio. Well, he's not physically in the studio, but he was on talking about his book from China Weird. We had him on, I don't know, probably a couple of years ago now. And he's written.
Last year.
Was it last year only? Yeah.
Wasn't it last year? I think that book came out in March 2017 or something like that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, okay. So, yeah, about a year and a bit. And, so you've got a new book out. It's a different type of book. It's like
number 217.
Sort of a fiction based on some crazy conspiracy facts and stuff like that. Based on Joseph Farrell's work, The Giza Death Star Restored. We both read it. It was awesome. Actually, you even allowed us to do a foreword for it.
I gotta add this. So the intro we just recorded, that the email that you went back in time and read was from March 28th, something like that. Well, Carl's episode came out on April 1st, 2017.
Oh, wow. There you go. A little bit of a synchronicity to start us off.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming back on to talk about it. And really, it was an awesome book, Carl. We loved it.
217 was one of the funnier episodes, too.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. You know, we should also mention Napoleon, the guy who does your artwork, because he also did the cover illustration for the book. And I want to thank both of you for turning me on to him, and also Napoleon for doing such a great job on the illustration.
All right. Yeah, that's a good point.
So this is kind of like a Grimerica project, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we had a small part. Yeah, it was a great book. I found.
Yeah, you even passed it on to friends and stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good one.
So, wow. So your friends liked it too?
Yeah. Well, I gave it to the one buddy who helped. He kind of helps clean up some of my writing. So.
We should actually give it. But here's a great book for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've done that.
It was fucking, it was a good book, man. It was one of the, I don't read a lot of novels, but it was like, it had such a twist on, all the themes that we follow here, and it had some Indians in it. So yeah, I was all in, man. Indians, Nazis, and ancient technology.
Shamanism, ancient technology. Yeah, I love these.
Doobies in there.
I love these types of books where it's kind of like, it takes you through this. There's a possibility that some of this stuff is true. And even when you get into you start off by getting into deep state stuff, and then you're like, man, if that is true. But, you've heard the conspiracy rumors before, and then you wonder, and then, it takes you all the way through. We've had a couple other guests on, too, that have created these types of books, and they're my favorite. I think they're my new favorite type of novel, is the ones that are sort of based on conspiracy facts or conspiracy possibilities, and then get into some real stuff as well. So, yeah. It was really good.
Well, Dr. Farrell talks about that too, doesn't he? And I guess some of the middle books. What would that be? After
the Fourth Reich,
not after SS Brotherhood of the Bell, but a little later than maybe it starts with the Philosopher's Stone, the Quest for Deep Physics, something like that. And he talks about how there was a post-war Nazi writer that wrote a lot of so-called science fiction, but he would preface these books with, in this book is hidden actual reality or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And he says you can learn a lot about what was going on in the Nazi post-war scene by reading this guy's books. So it wouldn't be the first time historical fiction is used to explore these ideas.
Yeah, that's right. I totally forgot about the whole start of it there.
Yeah.
And that's like, yeah, that's all fun stuff, because we're going into a big, I want to go down the Nazi rabbit hole here sometime, and I'd like to do a couple episodes on that. We should get Joseph on and do an episode just on Nazis. Because
he could take you a lot further down that rabbit hole than I can.
Are you talking about post-World War II Nazis, or go all the way back even further?
No, I like post-World War II, I think, is good enough. Like with the...
he's been on your show a couple times, hasn't he? What did he talk about?
One time we did Antarctica and some Nazi stuff, and kind of, I can't remember where else we went.
I think we were UFO, Deep State, 9/11. He was really the one that articulated the different layers of the 9/11 conspiracy. It kind of made me think about it in a different way.
Yeah, that's right.
But we could do a straight Nazi show for sure, because I think there's a lot to that, especially like Oh yeah, the museum stuff, going to the museum in Iraq and all that stuff, kind of what was funny to me is when I was reading it, it kind of triggered in my head that it's like, hey, maybe Trump is a Nazi.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, he wouldn't be the first in the White House, would he?
Doesn't seem like it.
All those things you guys just mentioned are dealt with in the book too. Dr. Farrell, I think, is the most important nonfiction writer alive today. The kind of things that he's revealing in those books are so well researched and supported and documented. I mean, what would you expect from an Oxford scholar, right? Just exactly that. That it leaves you with the shuddering possibility that this guy is onto something. Even if he's not 100% correct, he certainly got the big picture down, And I thought, what would happen, if everything he's saying is real, what's a story that would take place amidst this reality, for people who were hip to it? Maybe something that's going on right now that we don't know about. And that's kind of what launched me. I never really expected to write a novel, but I was sure that I could not match his nonfiction work. And there's a lot of heavy physics and math in some of it. So I thought, maybe a novel would make this accessible to people and see, how it could play out. What's the logical consequence if everything goes wrong? So
well, and I like the peek.
What,
Yeah, and then the peek into the deep state, like the back room, like the Smoking Man style thing, where these guys are really trying to plan the destruction or plan that the whole event was pretty cool as well, because it really did take you from that the thing Darren was just talking about, like in the Iraq museum and all that, and then it takes you to, it really gets you. It gives you that feeling that there might be this group of people that are actually onto shit like this.
Yeah, it takes you into their secret lair in San Carlos de Bariloche and the Dulce base, which are popular, let's say, tourist attractions for conspiracy theorists, right? All of these things play vividly in the imagination, and it would just be interesting to put them all together into a single narrative instead of always viewing them in isolation in this book or that book,
So do you think, could you give us like a little couple minutes sort of rundown of the book just to kind of get, everyone in the vibe?
Well, I don't know if we'll get everyone to buy it, but a quick rundown would be that it's based on the first three. I guess Dr. Farrell would say four, because he did put, I think, Reich of the Black Sun as technically the third book, but he wrote the Giza Death Star series, which is 3 books, 4 if you count Reich of the Black Sun. There's the Giza Death Star, the Giza Death Star Deployed, and the Giza Death Star Destroyed. And it's a fascinating trilogy. I did not start reading his books from the beginning, as he recommends, with the Giza Death Star. I started near the end, I think, with The Third Way, which is a book about the Nazi International, and that was mind-blowing enough. But after I read a couple, I thought, well, I got to go back to the beginning and read these in order and see if that makes a difference. So I got through the Giza Death Star Destroyed, and I was like, well, what about the Giza Death Star Rebuilt or something like that, right? Isn't it possible for someone to do that? And that's when the idea for the story first started circulating, but I didn't think I had enough for a novel yet, because those are really science-based books where he delves deeply into the physics and the lost history behind them, and I needed something more modern that I was more familiar with to make a narrative. So I kept reading through the books. I think I've gotten through about 15 of them now, and the Nazi stuff is what really brings it all into the modern world, especially his book on 9/11. I mean, that's something that people can really reach out and touch for themselves, And then I started to get an idea of how, in a modern narrative, these pieces could come together. But one thing I remember Woody Allen saying is never write about something you don't know. So I had to draw from personal experience and characters I know in real life to put the book together. And I remember both you guys and Tim Banal had a lot more questions about the tracker school stuff and my contact with the Navajos out west that kind of went into the world of woo-woo a little bit. So I thought, well, I could bring that in, and then, I'd be kind of writing about myself and my friends in a way. So I could do that, and I blended the narratives into this single story where Dr. Farrell finds out that the Nazis are trying to restart the Giza Death Star. They have the technology. They've done the archaeology. They've recovered the ancient texts. They have machines that can reproduce the parts that were destroyed. And now it's up to him to stop them because every agency in the government has been too compromised. They would never be able to pull it off. And he calls on this private circle of people he knows to assist him. And there's a character based on one of my instructors at Tracker School who kind of operates this altruistic and philanthropic band of mercenaries that love this kind of stuff. And these other two characters, one of them is based on my best friend from Tracker School, and he becomes a character that assists them. He's in this other guy's little private circle of philanthropic mercenaries, and they go from one challenge to the next, trying to stop these Nazis, and it kind of shows how the deep state works behind the scenes as well through these bogus charitable organizations and NGOs, and how they orchestrate world events, and they're doing this in such a manner as to directly combat opposition as well as move forward their goals. And Farrell has to stay one step ahead of them, and he's not always there. He's playing catch-up ball sometimes with his crew. And it comes to a tumultuous climax on the Giza Plateau at the pyramid itself, where, the Nazis have started it up and they're causing earthquakes all over the world. And this private group of mercenaries is trying to get in there to turn the damn thing off before they destroy the planet. It brings world leaders together to launch these joint military expeditions to take over the Giza Plateau, and the whole thing just comes to this big crescendo right there where it all started millions of years ago. So that was it. I guess it was kind of a personal fantasy, too, to insert a character somewhat based on myself into the story,
Yeah, but it's also based on, there's also a lot of other cool things. Like, I think you had the portal thing in there, too, which the governments were kind of, there's peeps about that as well now, that there's people investigating portals, that are in the know in the government. And I think was the pyramid stuff based on Dunn's work as well?
The pyramid stuff was based on the work of 4 people. There's Farrell, Dunn, Kunkel, and I think the 4th guy was named Cadman. And I think it was Kunkel and Cadman who figured out it could have been powered by water.
Right.
Ooh. And the Nile used to run a lot closer there too, right?
Yeah, it did, and so they could, get the water up there to power it. And I think they had a reservoir that's dried up since also that was above the pyramid.
And it shot the shit out of the planet that used to be between here and Mars.
That's right. No, between Mars and Jupiter. Between Mars and Jupiter, yeah. And that's dealt with too. Farrell mentions that while trying to explain this stuff to some of the less knowledgeable characters in the book, and he says something like, the asteroid belt, well, that used to be a planet, or something like that. And, and there's a lot of Easter eggs in the book too. I've been so indoctrinated by popular culture that there are these Easter eggs throughout the book, lines taken from movies and TV shows and things like that. And in some cases, I reveal the Easter egg, but in other cases, I leave it to the reader to recognize that line. You know, there's one part of the book where somebody said, where Thorny says, it's all in the reflexes, you know, so people who are big fans of the movie that came from would recognize that. And I think a lot of people in conspiracy circles would be familiar with most of the movies I am. There's stuff from Repo Man, Big Trouble in Little China, Casablanca, all kinds of stuff, you know. Hogan's Heroes is in there somewhere. So I put all these little pieces in there that just out of fun, because I can't help it. And that would make the book enjoyable for a lot of culture vultures, too, just to uncover those things.
Most of those would have went right by me. But I think Thorny spends some time hotboxing a cave. So I can relate to
that. That's true. But I did pick, like, alternative history and science flashpoints. There's a couple you mentioned. There was the Stargate, that's supposedly in the ancient city of Ur. I think you were talking about portals. There's the pyramid itself. There's the Nazi International. There's 9/11. I think there's some discussion of the Kennedy assassination. One of the Nazis, I think Richter, the chief physicist, puts together a PowerPoint presentation to show their corporate suck-ups, you know, what the plan is and what their role is in it. And he explains this whole sordid history of how they've worked behind the scenes and put companies together and how they're trying to rebuild IG Farben to be like the corporate overlord for the world and things like this, you know, and the methods they use through big pharma and pop culture to seduce people and numb their minds. So that's another hot point for conspiracy theorists. And the CIA drug running is another one that makes it in there. The Dulce base, all these hot topics find their way into the narrative.
Oh yeah, there's the whole spin on the economic takeover of the world after World War II. Yeah, that's still part of the still part of that Nazi mystery. Man, we really got to do an episode on all that. You could put like 8 episodes, 10 episodes just out of the book.
I'd listen. Well, I was just about to say something when you reminded me of something there. The whole Nazi corporate takeover reminded me of another point, and now it escapes me. Darn it! I can't remember. So anyway, well, what's your next question?
Well, what motivated you to do this? I mean, I know you kind of were thinking. I mean, you mentioned it a little bit about Joseph Farrell's work and sort of putting it into a fiction. I mean, is it just something that popped in, or were you thinking about it for a while?
Well, I was pretty inspired by the work, and to be honest with you, the story started writing itself in my own mind, in a way, or my own imagination. You know, a lot of times authors will start with the end of a book and then write backwards to just get to that end, or they'll outline it or something like that. And I didn't do any of that, man. I was just so inspired. This voice started speaking to me, and I would listen to it, and the story came out really exactly from first word to the last in that order. You know, I guess I had to kind of like go back and rephrase things in places and stuff like that, but I never once had to map out a strategy for getting the story out. And I think that's partly due to the spirit that Farrell imbues his work with. You know, he's a very devoted man to the divine, and I think that comes out in his work. But also just the stirring of my own spirit that the book provided for, his books provided for me. You know, it was a very great awakening, you could say.
I was kind of going to ask you about that, about if there's any spiritual practice involved in the writing, because we hear some authors that almost have downloads. Books get created within a week or two. We've had a couple people on, or people have important things happen in their life before they all of a sudden, just write a book real quick, kind of thing. And I mean, you hear about writer's block and stuff like that, and people that take long time to do their books. I mean, do you feel like there was any kind of channeling involved or anything like that, or were you in any kind of spiritual practice that helped like this whole thing flow?
Well, from I guess our earlier interview and the other book, that I have had spiritual practices in my life. I kind of let them run on their own, sort of on autopilot, if you will. I don't do too many specific practices anymore, like astral projection or meditation or anything like that. But I kind of feel like those things are going on all the time. I would hesitate to call it channeling, though, but it was, I would call it more of like a vision, and I think the vision arose, at least I'm aware of two reasons of why it arose. One is for me to integrate the work into myself. The work of the book, Farrell's works, the new knowledge, the new consciousness that awakened from reading the books, and also to make Farrell's work accessible to a new audience who doesn't like nonfiction or who can't handle the deep physics and chemistry that he gets into in some of his books. This kind of puts it in a more palatable form for them. And, when you have a spiritual vision, it's never only just for you. There's always some greater good attached to it that you might not be aware of at the time, but usually these things are to benefit others as well as yourself, Otherwise, that awakening or that integration would be merely selfish. And that's kind of the opposite message of the book. So, that's why I think it came about.
Yeah,
I would like to say that was my idea, but it wasn't. It just really forced itself on me.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. You're probably open to that influence.
I wonder if that's the same as channeling.
Yeah, I don't know. See, I don't know enough of. I don't know if it's. I've done vision quests, so I can speak from that perspective, but I can't speak from the point of view of channeling. You guys might know more about it than me and make a better judgment.
Not really.
No, we don't know.
No, Darren's pretty skeptical of that, but I mean, it might just be you're in a meditative state and you're allowing things to flow through you. But, we just had a sort of more of a deeper channeler on. We haven't released the episode yet.
I'd have more time for channeling if that's what it is.
Yeah. There's probably different levels of it or something. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. Well, people could just come up with different names for the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So some people would call it inspiration. Some would call it imagination. Some would call it channeling. Some would call it vision. I don't know. We could all be talking about the same thing and not even know it.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little while ago that we were both interested in the original show we did with you about your tracker school and all that. I mean, maybe you should get a little deeper into that and how you brought that into the book, because that was it. Now it's all coming back to me from that episode about the trackers and the concentric circles and almost like the morphing into the animals and all that. Am I on the right track there for that?
Yeah, one of the things that came to me while writing the book, and it hit me, kind of slapped me suddenly, was that these concentric rings, like rings on a ring. Now, trackers use concentric rings in the wilderness or in the city to perceive changes and glean information. But it occurred to me that this is not unlike the ripples in the primordial nothing that Dr. Farrell talks about, that gave birth to the universe, the physical universe. Right? So I thought, I'm going to carry this concentric ring theme throughout the book, because this could be how the native peoples of North America, or, South America, shamanic civilizations all over the world, maybe this is how they accomplished great things. They were tapped into that power, but they kept it at a more primitive and natural level. They didn't need the technology to tap into it because they were tapped into it. And there's a couple points in the book where Thorny and One Flare interact with Dr. Farrell about that, where they say things to him like, concentric rings, Doc, get it? And he's like, I get it, because he's the guy who's putting that message out there, but in another way, right? So I think there's definitely a connection between how trackers and these primitive societies use concentric rings in their daily lives and in their shamanic practices to the kind of science and high magic that Dr. Farrell talks about, in alchemy that Dr. Farrell talks about in his books. It's all torsion. It's all scalar. What are they? They're rings. They're ripples. And I wanted to put that in there. And I even asked Napoleon, after he had done the original sketch, I said, can you add one thing? Can you add like ripples on a pond around the pyramid? And he put that in. And then when I saw his rendition of that, I was like, that's exactly it. And how did the pyramid work as an ancient weapon of mass destruction? By using resonance waves,
From
right?
water.
Harmonic waves to wreak havoc and destruction. So it's all there. You can use these rings as a creative and spiritual rebirthing process, or you can use these rings as a destructive and catastrophic technology.
Is that what they were able to
Go
tap
ahead.
into, and they're able to send the thought balloons?
That's a good question. I did not think of that, but that might be how it works. I was taught that as like an isolated practice, and we would do it in first learning it at tracker school, and then at later, on the way home in rest areas or airports, and it definitely works.
Really?
And
Can you walk us through that process?
Man, I'm like 15 years out of practice because I became such a spiritual Luddite during my time in China. But you need to imbue that bubble. First, you envision the bubble with all the passion you can muster. And then you put your message into that bubble with all the passion you can muster. I mean, if it's not important to you, you will not be successful with the practice, okay? Because I remember doing it in off days. And, this is how you do it. Okay, see, nothing happened. But then when something was like just absolutely urgent, almost life and death, you'd make that bubble and you'd send it out and it would do something. And I remember the first time I did it, I was working with this Italian guy at tracker school, and I wanted to send him a bubble that would make him turn left, right? So he's walking down the trail. He doesn't know what I'm doing. He just knows I'm going to try to make some kind of bubble. So I send him this bubble, and he starts veering way off to the left. And he says, okay, I think your bubble was to make me turn off to the left. And I said, well, you don't have to exaggerate so much. And he's like, no, I couldn't help it. All right? So then he did the same thing to me, but his was to, like, make me stop. So I'm walking along the trail, and I don't know what I'm going to encounter. And all of a sudden, I stopped, and I looked around, and then I kept going. And then I said, wait a minute, was your bubble to make me stop? And he was like, yeah, that's right.
So
you don't see the message, you just do it.
I've never put like informational stuff. I've only put like feelings or motivations into bubbles. I've never, like, in the book, I have people actually putting messages to each other in the bubbles.
Right.
Yeah, because I tried to send.
I know that's possible because I've seen other people do it, but I have not been successful myself.
I tried to send Graham a thought bubble to pack some stuff when we were on our cabin trip last month, and he didn't do it.
In fact, I didn't even. It wasn't even a thought in my mind.
He even looked at it.
I was like,
he
what
looked
are
at
you
it and
talking
assumed
about?
it was someone else's. Yeah.
Well, sometimes that is successful, though. Like, they already left, and I forgot to tell them to bring the potato chips, and then they show up, and they have potato chips, and you think, hey, how did you know to stop and get potato chips? They're like, I don't know, I just had an idea we should get some.
Yeah, but Darren wasn't passionate enough at all. I mean, he was just like.
You blaming me?
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Yeah,
you.
well, listen to him. He never sounds passionate, does he?
You're all fucking glutened up.
That's Darren's thing.
What?
He's just super chill, man.
Yeah, it was chill passion.
Yeah.
Passion
Well,
chill.
why don't you start with those bubbles, making people chill out, right?
Yeah.
Next time Graham gets angry, just like send him a chill bubble.
It's hard in the summer. He keeps the door open.
But I'll tell you, what was I going to say now? I thought this was a bubble story, but it's not. It's a tracking story. So
That's okay.
I'll skip it.
No, mention it.
All right. Well, since tracking plays a role in the book, and I talk about counter tracking, there was a hilarious trick somebody played on a guy at tracker school. There's one of the instructors there used to bring an Aquafina bottle into his tent every night, right? And the reason he brought an Aquafina bottle is because the nozzle on the bottle is a lot bigger than other water bottles, right? Just like more normal water bottles are like a Coke bottle, right?
Is it?
Real
Oh boy.
small. Well,
I know where this is
a wide
going
mouth.
already.
Yeah, well, the guy would use it to pee in his tent at night so he wouldn't have to get up out of the tent. Well, one night before bedtime, somebody snuck over to his campground and cut the bottom out of his bottle, right? Cut a little hole in the bottom. So he gets up at night and he's like peeing into the bottle and he's like, this bottle's not getting any heavier, right? And it doesn't feel warm. And then he notices the sound of trickling water on the floor of his tent. And he gets all pissed off about it. Well, I get up one morning. Yeah, this is a bubble story. And I want to put on my sandals because it's a hot day, right? My sandals are right there where I'm sleeping. I say, yeah, I'm going to put these sandals on today because it's pretty hot. I don't want to wear running shoes, And I'm like, no, I can't wear those sandals today. I'm going to see if I can find where I set my running shoes. And I walked up to the kitchen area, and my running shoes were sitting there at the base of a tree, and there was like a glow around them, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, there they are. Why they look bright this morning? The sun must be hitting them just so, right? And I put my running shoes on, and I start walking around the camp. It's the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, so you leave clear tracks everywhere you walk. Well, Eddie sees my tracks in the morning and figures I'm the guy who cut his piss bottle. Okay? Now, he doesn't say he thinks it's me, but he's talking in the kitchen. He says, yeah, I see the tracks of the shoes of the guy who done it all over the kitchen here this morning. So I said, that's interesting. Most tracks are mine right now because not many people awake yet. So I hoof over to his camp area, and I see 2 perfect footprints right next to each other with my shoes.
Oh.
Right? Now, I know I didn't do it, right? So somebody clearly put on my shoes to cut his piss bottle and then put bubbles around my sandals and my running shoes so I would choose one or the other in the morning to wear. So it was a double prank on both Eddie and me. So later that day, Tom Brown's leaving one of the lectures and walking past our work shed to go in his yurt, and he looks over at me and he says, that you who cut Eddie's piss bottle last night? And I said to him, I think it was you, because only you could set me up like that. And then he just got this big shit-eating grin and took a puff on his Marlboro. Went into the yurt.
Nice.
That's
So
pretty
yeah,
funny.
that is a bubble story for sure. That's how I think he did it. So he put information in there, right?
That's
Not
a good one.
Yeah.
And it resonates with our crowd because Graham's a piss jug guy. And he uses the wide mouth bottles. Oh,
really? You're an Aquafina guy, huh?
No, it's Gatorade. Gatorade is the one with the bigger mouth on it.
Yeah.
Less
what
likely
Darren
to
use,
spill.
a regular Coke?
Yeah.
What the fuck? I use a fucking ice cream pail.
So what kind of tracking school is that, though? Is that like a shamanic tracking school, or like what? It seems a bit not like your average, I
think it's Navajo, isn't it?
No, it's Apache. Tom was taught by a Lipan Apache who he called grandfather, and he once told me his name in Apache, and I can't remember it. But he learned from the time he was like 7 years old how to track and survive in the wilderness from this guy, and he was taught the Apache spirit songs and whole full of philosophical and spiritual tradition, and now he passes it on to anybody who will pay for a tracker class, and it's a lot of people. By the time I got there, he had already had something like 80,000 students go through the school.
Wow.
Jeez.
And there was, and I guess since he's a white guy, he's teaching mostly white people, but one of the characters in the book was an Apache Indian Imetic tracker school. The Daryl character is based on him. And he came to a number of classes and would often help out when Tom did the West Coast courses. I haven't been there since 2001, so I really don't know what it's like there anymore. But I'll tell you, man, it was some of the best years of my life were spent going in and out of that place. And that was one of the most eye-opening and awakening times of my life. I mean, it was more mind-blowing than an acid trip. It was incredible, the stuff that we did and accomplished with what Tom taught us.
How long was it?
Each class is a week. I took like 15 classes. I got some classes for free because I helped out a lot. And I remember one time I showed up, I was dropping some people off at a class, his Way of the Coyote class in 2000, I think, and I was just giving some people a ride there. And the guy who ran the kitchen came up to me and said, hey, Thorny, I think you need one of these, and handed me a volunteer badge. So then suddenly I was there for the week. It turned out to be really synchronistic. I would say my life is full of synchronistic experiences. That was one of them, and that was a mind-blowing class too. And then Tom came into all the volunteers that week. They're called helpers, and said, okay, I need you helpers to form your own helper group. You can't be helping out too much during this class because you have too much to learn. And we ended up being in the majority of the lectures and all the outdoor exercises.
So how much do you that's almost 3.5 months. How much are you accessing that in your day to day? Because that's got to be some powerful stuff.
Well, my wife complains about it sometimes. Like, she'll turn around and suddenly I'm standing there, and she'll get angry at me for walking so quietly. Or she's looking for something and can't find it, and I say, well, there it is. And she said, how did you see that? And I'll say something like the eye of the tracker or something, some wisecrack. But so, yeah, it seeps in. Seeps in.
But there really is a knack to that. I remember I had a girlfriend in Nelson, BC once, right? And her dad was her dad was a hunter kind of guy, right? He was always hunting.
Right.
And he took me out sometimes, and he would catch things moving in the woods, and I couldn't even see them. And he'd be like, see that right over there? And it would take me like 5 minutes to find what he's looking at. And it would just be like a natural instinct for him to just pick up on stuff happening in the woods. It was incredible seeing that.
I'm very light on my feet too. I wonder if that's because I'm half Indian. I'm always sneaking up on people.
It could be. I mean, your brain is hardwired for certain things based on, where you come from genetically. So
has to be, right? Is that racist to say that? Are you being racist right now?
I'm being scientific, man.
It's hardwired, Darren. You're hardwired to be light on your feet.
I'm okay with that. Sounds wonderful. What else am I hardwired for?
Yeah. So, that there could be something to that. I don't know. Maybe it's a tradition you want to pursue a little more thoroughly.
I should get into sneaking around, sneaking up on people.
What's your heritage, man?
Ojibwe.
Oh, Ojibwe. That's Great Lakes area.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I was with an Ojibwe guy when he made it rain.
Ooh, I should get into that. I think we do have rain dancing for sure.
Part of the story is set in the Holiday Inn in Gallup, right? And that's because I spent time there working on a project with the American Indians on substance abuse, right? The government was giving them grants to use their own methods to do that. And it was called the Rural, Remote, and Culturally Distinct Communities Program. And we were at one of these things. I remember the first day there, and I was new to the project. And the first day there, I come down for breakfast, and I got my tray of food from the buffet, and I look over at this table, and there's all these pencil necks from Washington. Yes, and so where did you get your master's degree? That's very interesting. And then I did my postdoc work at, I'm like, I'm not sitting over there. I hate that kind of talk, right? And then I see this table where, like, everybody's laughing hilariously. Like, they're all laughing so hard they're pounding on the table, right? So I'm thinking, well, that looks like the place to be right there. So I walk over there, and I said, you got room for one more? And they all, like, they pulled it. The table was full. They all slid over and made room for another chair. And there's this Ojibwe guy, medicine man, big-time leader of his nation, and he's telling the filthiest jokes I've ever heard in my life. The spiritual leader of the Ojibwe people in Wisconsin, I think. And we're just laughing and having this raucously good time, and it's all Indians except for me. And then, a couple of days, they just built a relationship from there, and the next day, the same guy called me over, the Ojibwe guy, and he said, you know something? You're the first white guy who ever wanted to sit with us. And I said, I don't know about that. I just heard everybody laughing at your table and figured it was the best place to be. And he's like, I don't care what the reason is. You're the first white guy. And we're going to do something special for you and your mom this week. My mom was at the conference, too. And fourth day into the conference or whatever it was during the Navajo Nation Fair. And the corn harvest was really bad because there was a drought, right? So they got some Navajo medicine men, this Ojibwe guy, a Tigwa guy from Texas, and Hawaiian Kapuna, and maybe I should say Kahuna. Or maybe the Kapuna was there too. One's a man, one's a woman. They're brother and sister. Maybe they both went. And this Lakota woman. And we started, they came up to us and said, you two aren't working today. We're taking you out to the desert to show you something. And we piled into this van, and we started driving into the res, and picked up this old woman who couldn't speak any English. She only spoke Navajo. And they had to ask me to take off my sunglasses because they scared her. She was really, really traditional and very old. So I had to take off my sunglasses in the desert. And then they dropped her off somewhere and kept going, and they got off the pavement, and they're driving way out in the desert, like how you see in cartoons, like these bleached skeletons of animals in the desert. That's where they were driving through. You could actually see, like, dead horses and donkeys and stuff out there.
Were you ever thinking, like, holy fuck, these guys are going to kill me?
Right. I've never been this far out in the desert before, right? So they finally stopped at this rock that looked kind of like a frog, and the Navajo guys started telling us this story about how the rock used to be a frog, and the frog turned into a rock and made some promise to the Navajos that whenever they needed rain, they can come and ask him to make it rain for them. And they did this ceremony there, and we watched it, and we offered tobacco, the whole thing. And then the Tigwa guy, I think it was the one, he was the big joker in the crowd. He said, like, come on, let's get out of here fast. and they started tearing. I mean, they were like just, blowing up dust on the way to the get back on pavement. And just as we hit that road, man, this huge front moved in. It was black and just poured down rain. And then they were saying, yeah, we just saved the corn harvest for the Navajo Nation. And when we got back to the fair, the sky cleared up, the rain was gone, and we just had a great time at the Navajo Nation Fair.
Did you pick up the old lady?
No, the old lady, I guess, wherever we dropped her off, she stayed.
Huh.
It was really
like her house or something. Yeah.
I'm wondering if I'm thinking she did it.
Yeah.
You think the old lady was the one who did it?
Yeah, well, that's how you. That's kind of where I was focusing the whole time. Yeah. They didn't want to let you onto the real secret. So they took you to the Frog Rock. We'll take the white guy to the Frog Rock.
Yeah, that was the sideshow, right?
That's an awesome story, though.
Yeah. So, I think there's some truth to the stories you hear about these secret Indian powers. They have some way of doing it, and that's why I wanted to get the concentric rings into the book, because there's a lot more to that mystery than just tracking.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Darren, there you go.
That's a good one.
You can learn to make rain and make concentric circles.
And I made sure to include in the book stuff people could do on their own to experiment with this stuff,
What's the easiest one?
The easiest one probably is to just go sit quietly in the woods and observe the concentric rings moving around you. If the birds come real close to you, everything's normal. If the birds suddenly react, if you don't move and the birds are suddenly reacting some way, something is happening. There's a predator of some kind moving through the area. You can do that very easily, and not far from your home, probably, if you live someplace like Canada. You guys are way up there. There's probably some wooded spot you can go to and do that every morning.
Yep. I'll be out in the woods this Saturday night. I'll keep an ear out as well, as an eye out.
I find the birds here get louder when the cats go out back.
Oh, really? Oh,
exactly.
Yeah.
See? That's a concentric ring right there.
Okay, you got to walk me through that.
You don't even need to see the cat. When you hear the birds making a certain sound, the cat is there.
Yes, I agree with that 100%.
That's a concentric ring.
Isn't that just brain?
They can be subtle. They can be subtler than that. Things can suddenly go silent, or the birds might all fly down from the treetops.
So, is a subtle ring bigger? Like, is it based on ring size? So, is like a crazy synchronicity would be a tighter ring than me hearing knowing the cat's out back because of the birds. Like, I can even tell if the cat killed a bird because there's a different chirp for that.
Right. Exactly. Yes. I wouldn't say subtler ones are bigger. They're all the same. You just have to learn the language, and they all travel through the forest for some distance.
So that's where the concentric ring comes from. That it's sort of like a radius, like where the cat is. There's a radius of activity or a change in activity.
Yes, and the peak activity is at the center of the ring. So someone who's really skillful at this could be, say, 200 or 300 yards from where the cat is.
Yeah.
So it's like throwing a rock in the lake, basically.
Exactly.
And you can feel that
and somebody
ripple.
on the other side of the lake knows that somebody just threw a rock in it because they see the ripples on the pond.
So if you get good at sensing these things, then you could sense another sort of predator in another area, and the rings are overlapping, and you could sort of sense where the safe spot is that's not within the rings or whatever.
Right.
Oh,
and I have to confess, I never really got quite that good at it, but I know it works.
Yeah, no, I could see that for sure. Huh. Graham would be a big, sloppy, crunchy ring, I bet.
No, we used to sneak around.
He'd probably put up a bird plow.
No, we used to be pretty good at sneaking around as kids.
You were a lot nimbler then. A little less huskular.
Yeah. So maybe we should keep going. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, somebody, once told me that if you write a book, it doesn't really matter whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and you dazzle people with all this woo-woo, but you give them nothing practical that they can do, then it's really nothing more than a book of black magic, because you're not helping people. You're just dazzling them, right? And if you want to make a book that will legitimately help people and how do you put it, be a more spiritual work of light, then you have to put practical things that people can do for themselves in there, so that they can awaken their own consciousness, not just be amazed by what other people do.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and also dropping deep state conspiracies in there that are based on interesting little tidbits, like the whole
the sacking of the Baghdad Museum.
Like
is like I was searching for the articles on that.
I could tell that it was really. I could tell that you had thrown some times and some dates, some facts in there on that too that make it really interesting.
There's some real gems.
So I mean, even if it gets people thinking that those are possibilities, even is
possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, those, if I've given dates of historical events in there, then they're all true and they're researched. Actually, I'll tell you what, even the earthquakes are real earthquakes. You can go to an earthquake site and find them, the dates and the times and the locations. And it kind of corresponded exactly with, it was bizarre. When I first wrote the book, I thought it would end in 2017. But when I was doing the research on the earthquakes, I found like the exact dates I needed for a 2014 end of the book. And so I used that instead, yeah. So there's like 2 earthquakes in Panama and 1 in Indonesia, and you can look that up. Those were real earthquakes.
Nice.
Yeah,
but that just makes the narrative tauter, that, people who want to dismiss the book lightly and say, oh, this is all just bullshit, and then they can get online and research this stuff and see, no, this stuff really happened. Even the deep state stuff that Graham just mentioned, you can document their activity. It often pops up as some little article on page 7, man, but it's there.
Yeah.
And you just have to know how to interpret it.
Yeah.
And Farrell is brilliant at that stuff.
I wonder if he's a spook.
You think him and Dan at Dark Journalist over there are just messing with our minds?
Yeah, I don't think so. No, but it's fun to think about.
Yeah, there's one thing in the book I think that Dr. Farrell would. What? Go ahead.
There's so many. Like, how many books does he have now?
I think it's up to like 28.
Yeah, I don't understand how anybody can even write all those.
And they're all like 300 or 400 pages.
Yeah. That's like, man, I just went on this binge. I read nothing but Farrell until I got through like the 15th book. Now I have to take a break. I'm like reading lighter stuff now, but I'm going to get back to it. I want to get through all of them, because I want to get the full picture of his hypothesis.
This book would be great for that, for anyone who's reading. This is a fun book. It's definitely not going to be a chore to read. You don't want to put it down.
Yeah, and it puts together the first half of his hypothesis into a cohesive narrative. It's all in one place.
Huh.
Why don't we mention? Well, when you're done there, why don't we mention China Weird for a bit as well, and some of your experiences in China, just to. Because, a lot of people might not have listened. We've got a lot of new listeners since we last had you on as well.
All right, well, we can do that now if you want. You're over an hour already, it looks like.
Holy, really?
Yeah.
54 minutes.
Yeah, when you're having fun.
Yeah, I got about 10, 15 minutes probably.
We got to do a shroom session in the cabin together, gentlemen.
Sure, man. We can make that happen.
I'm not going again. I'm not doing the chaperone thing again. You guys are on your own. I'm not doing it again. No.
Well, come on.
It's too painful last time.
Well,
it's just like
we'll bounce back.
It's like herding cats. Trying to do anything. It's just. I'll just go in the woods and watch for concentric rings instead.
Listen.
Actually, you could probably see them on. You could probably sense it on mushrooms.
Them.
Pretty good, yeah.
Remember, I could feel that would be a good way to explain how I could feel Buddy coming down the stairs that time. When I was like, I'm in something. I'm under something.
Well, we were completely straight one night on a night tracking exercise, and like the tracks were lighting up like green lights, like those glow
Phosphorescent?
sticks. You crack them and they glow green. I was seeing tracks. They look like that, man. Like no alcohol, no drugs, nothing. Just watching these tracks light up in the road in front of me. It was amazing, man. So, Darren, you're on it.
I'm on it. Next time we'll do that. Now you have to come.
Yeah.
Now you're back in. I wheeled him back in. We got to do the crop circle this year too.
I want to take the wife on the Great American Road Trip, so maybe we can swing through Canada. I got another friend up in your neck of the woods, I think, from China. He was in the China Weird book, actually. He was up all night staying. He lives maybe in Manitoba, though, or Saskatchewan. You guys are in Alberta, right?
Yeah, we're pretty close to Saskatchewan.
It's all pretty close. I can be in Manitoba in 12 hours.
Yeah. Well, that's
it's when you get to Ontario that it starts getting fucking crazy long and big, and you got to go around giant lakes and shit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
so, I got a friend down there too, so might have to go maybe east to west in the States and west to east in Canada.
There you go. West to east is a lot more depressing than east to west. But that's probably the same in the States too, so.
Well, I guess we'll just do a lot of eating at Tim Hortons.
Oh, God.
Yeah, you'll be stopping at the same 3 places all the way through.
Yeah, that's it.
Or truck stops.
They're all Flying J's.
So China,
you got Flying J up there, really?
Yeah.
So
I got a diesel car,
taking over
so
everything.
I need a place that sells diesel to gas up.
Yeah, that's every place here for sure. We drive a lot of diesel trucks up here.
California, do you?
It's
cool.
California. Never mind.
Yeah, California, man. That's another. Someplace I got to go because I got a lot of friends there, though.
Go there now while you can before you need a passport.
Before you need a passport. Last time I went down to California, I was like, we were only there for like 20 minutes. I was like, we're getting out of here, man. We're going to go get your fucking fridge magnet, and we're getting the fuck back to Oregon.
Where'd you go in California?
Just to Crescent City.
That's not that bad a place, is it? That's
no,
like
I just mean California.
Line.
Yeah, exactly. It's perfect. Get back to Oregon. And I seen, I swear, I go down, you're in California for half an hour, and I seen fucking 20 cops.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Big difference, eh?
And then when you pull into California, they make you pull over just so they can check you out quick.
Yeah.
You have to pull over, and they're like, stop, and they just kind of look at you, and they're like, okay, keep going.
That's weird. Really?
Yeah.
I've just finished fucking smoking a joint or something. I'm like, holy fuck, here we go. And then we just pull over, and they're just like, go ahead. Yeah, but not when you're driving, I don't think. Last time we pushed the limits last time for sure, but he let us go.
Yeah. So
fucking Kyle almost rear-ended him.
Maybe, I don't know. So you guys want to talk about China Weird a little bit?
Sure. Give us some highlights.
The highlights. Well, the book's in 3 parts. There's my own stories from China, some ghostly tales of hauntings that I experienced, or some weird stuff that I saw. Then there are stories that the locals told me, mostly friends that I'd made while I was over there. One of them had a really good UFO story from about 1980 or 81 when she was taking the college entrance exam, and these UFOs overflew the school. And then there's the third part of the book, which is the legendary stuff that China's famous for, and I talk about things like the Yeren, which is the Chinese Bigfoot. Talk about these ancient civilizations that apparently recorded the presence of some high technology or alien race. There are stories about lake monsters and zhangshi, which are kind of a Chinese type of undead creature. Not exactly the same as a vampire. People usually call them Chinese vampires, but there's important technical differences. Yeah, I mean, if they're real. And I think I shed new light on the Ye Run story because I go pretty far back in the historic record for that. I think I go back like 3,000 years to unearth documentation of that. But it's also woven in with autobiographical stuff that makes it more interesting. So it becomes kind of a personal perspective and Chinese travel log where people can peer in and see what it's like to travel around China and meet people locally and work and live in that environment, So it's not like your typical story of supernatural or paranormal tales where someone just tells a ghost story. It's all woven into a larger context of a person's life and why they see it that way or why they don't dismiss it so easily or, things like that. And, even when I talk about the giant monkey of Wutong Shan, I talk about an experience I had when I was like 4 years old with my cousin Tony, where we saw some kind of mysterious primate in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and when we ran up to see what it was, the thing had vanished. And so then you see something strange later in your life. You have this memory to call on that you don't always see normal and ordinary things, and maybe you can't explain what they are, but you're not going to throw it away as a optical illusion or play of light because strange things happen in this universe, and just not being able to explain them doesn't mean they're not real.
Exactly.
So
yes,
that's what
does.
China Weird is about. So that's kind of a multi-layered book.
Yeah,
and
no,
people
that's
can
good.
go back. You could go to grimerica.ca/ep217, and that'll pop up our first interview with Carl, which we talk all about that fun stuff.
Yeah. So there's some pretty smoking hot pictures of the 10-cent girls in Chapter 9 if you want to see that.
What?
I don't remember that part.
Yeah, right. Graham's book just automatically opens to that page. You just set it down and bloop.
It's interesting because I think Bloomberg News just did an article on that a few weeks ago. It was after I returned to the States from China. And this guy named Balding on Twitter, who's like a visiting foreign professor over there, been there for years, also in Shenzhen, same as me. He posted that article and made some comment about it. And then, I replied that, hey, I was talking about this already last year in China Weird, Chapter 9, and put a link on Amazon. And he says, okay, now I know your book is true. I have to buy a copy. And then, like, the next day, I check Amazon, and somebody's bought a copy. So thank you, Balding, for living up to your word and buying China Weird. I hope you enjoyed the read.
Yeah, everyone should head over and buy a couple books. Buy this book for sure because you're really gonna like it, and it's kind of like a little piece of Grimerica memorabilia too.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did the
They're
forward.
both very enjoyable reads. I mean, China Weird has 5 full stars on Amazon out of 6 reviews. So, the people who have bought it have really liked it.
absolutely. I don't blame them. And this one, they'll enjoy this one too, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you guys want to cover, or you want to?
Is China gonna take over the world? Do we have to worry about that?
Can I play Thorny in the movie?
I don't think China's going to take over the world. They have a lot of problems that don't make it into the press. In fact, if you guys are interested in that, you might want to follow Balding's World on Twitter, because I think he's one of the few lucid people who talks about what's really going on in China politically and economically. He's got a very good handle on it.
That's good to know. Yeah, you hear different narrative from everywhere else.
Yeah. It's usually the more popular an idea is, the greater chance there is of it being wrong, I think.
Probably, yeah, exactly.
You know, there's one thing my father taught me when I was very young is that most people are stupid. So you never want to be like most people, you know. So that's what makes Grimerica special, right?
That's right.
Most people don't listen to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Most people, and even less support. But
So-
that's
oh,
okay.
yeah, well, we
13
should-
thumbs up already tonight, though.
We should mention
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Is it like is there movie potential for this? And will Darren get a cameo as a little native
I forgot
tracker?
all about that. I forgot all about that. You know, I had a mutual friend in Shenzhen, John Nara, who did the final cover design of both books. And it turns out he has a friend in Hollywood who's like a big-time scriptwriter. I can only remember his first name right now. It's Ray or Reynaldo. And he did some big Hollywood movies. I think Stand By Me was one of them, and a couple others. And he promised to review Giza Death Star Restored for script potential. I have not heard back from him yet. I'm sure it's not at the top of his list. But he emailed me personally and said he'd be reviewing it. So maybe I should get in touch with him or John and see if there's any progress on that front. Because the book, I think, would make a better movie than a book, because the book is mostly dialogue. It's practically written already, right?
That's right.
And
Graham could be a
it is
Nazi.
kind of
I'll be one of the deep state Nazis, and you
That
can
just
be
gets-
one of the trackers.
Yeah.
Concentric ring
Just one in the
trackers.
background. I don't want any lines
Yeah.
because I'll just fuck it up.
Well, you better follow up with those guys, and hopefully they don't steal your idea. Because I mean, we had a guy on once, and his idea was stolen to make the show OA.
Oh, that's right.
And that
Really?
was pretty mind blowing. And he's like, well, actually, these guys from Hollywood did come by, and I never heard back from them. Meanwhile, a fucking super popular show comes out on Netflix about his work.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen, because this Ray guy and we have a mutual friend in John, and John has really vouched for his character. He said he's one of the really decent people in Hollywood. And he had one of his ideas. I can't prove this, so I'm just going to say it's a rumor that I've heard, that Steven Spielberg stole one of his ideas or did something to prevent the release of a movie, so that I can't remember if it was E.T. or what was the other UFO movie he did?
Close Encounters?
Yeah, Close Encounters. One of those could come out before Ray's movie, and then it turned out that Ray's movie couldn't come out or something like that. And now, bear in mind, this is all secondhand, so I don't know if it's all really true, but this is what I've been told. And they could have sued Spielberg and probably made a lot of money, but they never did, right? And then years later, they're in a meeting with him, I think, for a script or something. And Spielberg says, why didn't you guys sue me? You know, you would have won and you would have been paid. And they said, you know, we didn't come here to sue people. We came here to make movies.
Aw.
And Spielberg said, all right, we can work together on the project. You know, he just respected them so much for that,
Nice.
for showing character,
Yeah.
you know. So with that story to back up his character, I'm not worried that Ray would do something like that.
Good to know.
Yeah, good to know.
Good to know. Well, right on, man. Thanks for coming back, Carl.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And thanks for the honor of getting to write the foreword. That was awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool.
No, I thought you guys would be perfect for it. So, you know, you should pat yourselves on the back for that one.
Yeah,
And it was
thanks.
very well written.
Shout out
Very
to Bill.
impressed with your articulation skills.
Yeah, that's what Bill helps out with, some of the articulation. We
Who's Bill?
slap it together. He's our
He's our editor.
editor. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He
you
ties it
didn't-
up nicely.
You didn't drop a single F-bomb in the foreword, I think.
No, there was a couple. I think he edited them out.
So shout out to Bill.
Yeah.
He knows who he is.
Show
Yeah,
Bill.
shout out to Bill. All right.
Right
Okay,
on,
Carl.
Well, I
Carl.
hope our paths cross again, gentlemen.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Stay in
Let's make
touch.
sure of it.
All right, buddy.
If I end up in your neck of the woods, I'll let you know.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, buddy.
So,
Ciao.
yeah, you bet. You guys take care.
Okay,
You
take
too.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was our chat with Carl Joseph Demarco.
Right on, buddy. That was fun.
That was a fun one.
Yep.
Great book. Highly recommend. Head over, grab the link in the show notes. I think it's like $3.50.
Funny how the old show starts coming back after we start talking about it. Because I can't remember episodes very well. Yeah, but it was a good book.
Absolutely.
It was awesome.
Worth buying. Carl's always fun to have on.
That's my favorite 3 books from guests. The One Great Year, or whatever it's called, from Renee.
Sequel's coming out soon.
And Ephraim's book, the blue one, the one about the
Alien
blue,
Cartel?
Yeah, Alien Cartel, and then this guy's. Yeah, it was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
There you have it. Buy all those books.
Yeah.
Yep. Big thanks to Carl for coming on the show. Big thanks to you guys for listening. If you like the shows and the no commercials and all that stuff that we do for free, head over to grimerica.ca/support today and sign up for something. There's weeklies, there's monthlies, there's yearlies, and there's Patreon as well as a few crypto options. Currently, we're not doing Litecoin because I can't figure out the login, but the Bitcoin and Ether or whatever is all working
Ethereum?
again. Yeah.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, and I think we'll wrap it up there so Grambo can get to his hockey game. Good
Yeah,
luck.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening,
See ya.
and we'll see you next week. Well, guys, thanks for tuning into the live
thanks.
show.
Thanks.
Later,
That's awesome.
motherfuckers.